Okay, so welcome back. We're going to focus on one interesting question that the Kedushas Levi Yitzchak Berditchev brings down, and it's a question again that should pop out to all of us. We're in the Parshas about Pesach. We learn here about the Korban Pesach, and it gets us thinking about Pesach. But in the Torah, Pesach is never called Pesach. Pesach's always called Chag HaMatzos. Right? So this is what he's looking at. Why is it, right? And he builds this up a bit. He says, we find for sure the Korban's called Pesach. Chag Pesach. So says the Kedushas Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, Levi Yitzchak ben Sarah Sasha. It says, Yesh lahavin, shanu karim Yom Tov ha'mechuna b'Torah Chag HaMatzos, we call it Pesach. Why? Traditional people, the Torah calls it Chag HaMatzos, called Chag HaMatzos. He said, there's no hint in the Torah, there's no remez in the Torah to call this Yom Tov with the name Pesach. Okay, now he says it's based on this. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. There's reciprocal praise and love between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael. We say the praises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says our praises. Now the source for this is the Gemara in Maseches Brachos. It says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wears tefillin. Right? Famous Gemara, it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu wears tefillin. What's written in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin? It says, Mi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. Our tefillin say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem echad. We say the praise of Hashem. Hashem's tefillin, Gavar Yochel, they say the praise of Am Yisrael and the Achdus of Am Yisrael. And they add in even more psukim, Ashrecha Yisrael, the Sitcha Elyon, Mi goy Godol, all these different beautiful psukim about Am Yisrael are in the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's really what we refer to. If you're in a shul that says Anim Zmiris, so the line, Pe'ero alai u'pe'eri alov. Pe'er is a word for tefillin. Right? That's from Yechezkel. That's how we learned, it says, Chavesh percha me'elecha, that Pe'er is called tefillin. So Pe'ero alai u'pe'eri alov. Meaning like, my glory is on him and his glory is on me. Right? That's the relationship between these tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and tefillin of Am Yisrael. So he said the same thing is happening here with our name for Pesach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls it Chag HaMatzos in the Torah because the beauty of Am Yisrael hurrying out after HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? One of the aspects of matzah, though he speak b'tzekom lahachmitz, right? That the botzek didn't even rise, and that's really part of the bigger picture of what it says in the Navi, Zacharti lo chesed nurayich. I remember that chesed of your youth, avas klu osayich, lech techacharai b'midbar beretz lo zerua, right? V'gam tzedo lo achalohem, right? That Am Yisrael didn't even take a lunch. When did Jews travel without taking, right? You see, Jews go to the airport, you ordered the kosher meal, but just in case, you got a picnic basket. That's it. And here, right, they went, and that is something very beautiful. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls it Chag HaMatzos. But we speak about the idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Pasach al Batei B'nai Yisrael, and that's what we're doing. That's our involvement. Now, here in the back, they bring from a manuscript of Levi Yitzchak Berditchev. It's they call it Pizgamin Kadishin. So he fleshes this out a little bit more. He says, again, this concept of the two types of tefillin, of the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that praise Am Yisrael, tefillin of Am Yisrael that praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now he says that Hine Avodas Azos Zeu Avodas Ishi Yisraeli Bolam Hazeh. He said these two aspects of tefillin, our tefillin, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin, those really portray the type of avoda that a person is supposed to be doing tamid, constantly in this world. Shemechuyav ha'odam l'halal l'shabeach l'kalis tamidus HaKadosh Baruch Hu midosav hakadoshim. On one hand, a person is always supposed to be thanking Hashem, praising Hashem. Again, not that Hashem needs it, so to speak, but for us, that brings us closer. I saw recently, I forget who it was, said it, then when you're thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meaning, he's all around us. Just either you can ignore all the wonders around us and all the chesed and all the tov, and then you don't see him. But, right, if you recognize those things, so then you see it. The second aspect that we're supposed to do, again, we're supposed to imitate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is mechuyev adam tomid lelamid zchus v'sanigoria al Yisrael am kedosha. That a person is always supposed to judge favorably and to defend Am Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's holy nation. Okay, now I'll just point out, this is obviously the theme of Yitzchak Berditchev in all the stories. He's known as Sanigorin Shel Yisrael, the defender of Am Yisrael. To the extent that, always being able to find a way things to be good, right? Like they say, one, Erev Pesach, so he started asking Jews sometimes had to be involved in smuggling because the laws were so draconian there was no way for them to earn a living, and they used to smuggle. So he asked somebody in the shul, tell me, you have a bit of smuggled this. He said, yeah, Rabbi, I can get it for you. Yeah, I've smuggled this, yeah. He says, you have any chametz in your house? Rabbi, what do you think I am? He said, Rebbeinu Shalom, take a look. The Tsar is here with all of his soldiers. You know what he'd do if he catch them? And they're smuggling. You told them, don't have chametz in the house. Not one of them has chametz in the house. All sorts of things like this. He sees a Jew in his talis and tefillin, right, mumbling the davening while he's oiling the wheels of his wagon. So Rebbeinu Shalom, take a look. Even while your children oil the wheels of their wagon, they're davening to you and praising you. All the different ways of defending. Now, it should be pointed out, right? Some people have turned this also into a somewhat unbalanced fairy tale character, right? And they think you find, especially in the non-observant world, they wish, why couldn't all Orthodox Jews be like Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, who they thought he's fine with whatever anyone does. He's the rabbi of, Temple Oseh Shalom, and he sits there with a guitar singing, all you need is love, and that's it. He was a fighter. He fought very much against anything that tried to change authentic Judaism. But he also loved every Jew incredibly, and he defended them to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The two go together. The two are not opposites, and that's a big important part. Okay, so he said this is what a person is supposed to do, to try to find the good in other Jews, to praise them, and he says, and understand, it's inside every Jew. They're all descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The good DNA is in all of them. You may not be seeing it coming out, but you have to know. And therefore, if you see a little peek of it come out, you should know it's only a tip of the iceberg of the goodness of Am Yisrael. So that's the way a person is supposed to be looking. And he says if a person approaches it like that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to help you see good and not see the bad. And that'll enable you to do this more. Okay? And that is part of Avodas Hashem. He says because somebody who doesn't have this midah, to see the good that's in Am Yisrael, and to talk about praise of Am Yisrael, so that Am Yisrael should be meshubachim u'fu'arim in Hashem's eyes, right? We praise Am Yisrael to Hashem. He says if a person doesn't have this midah and to defend Bnei Yisrael, azayeda ne'amona, very harsh sentence, he should know for sure, shali yizke kol yimei chayav lichnos b'pesach shar avodas habari be'emes. You will never step over the threshold of true Avodas Hashem if you don't have that. Shezeu shar l'Hashem tzadikim yavovo. That is that gateway. That must be there. Okay, so now he said we have these two aspects. Number one, recognizing Hashem's goodness and praising Him. That's our tefillin that say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And walking in Hashem's ways, like the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu say, Mika Amcha Yisrael, we're also supposed to be doing this. Now here he explains an interesting Gemara, that one of the Tanoim said, Teisili del Mazgina Arba Amos below tefillin. He says, I would never walk 4 amos without tefillin. Okay, now there are some people that wear tefillin all day. It used to be more common. It's very difficult to do. But he says, it's impossible that you don't go Arba Amos without tefillin. A person has to go take a shower. A person goes to the mikveh. The halacha talks about it in dirty alleyways where you have to take off your tefillin if you have to cross through. There are many different scenarios. So he says, what does it mean? He said, I was always going, I never went Arba Amos, either with the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu or with the tefillin of Am Yisrael. Meaning, either I was involved in praising Am Yisrael, right, which is what's called the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or I was praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu for everything He's done for us. That's the tefillin of Am Yisrael. Meaning those two midas I was always involved in. I never walked Arba Amos without that. Okay, and he says, this was a famous statement of Reb Zusha of Anapoli, it was just his yahrzeit. He would say, Ribono shel olam, Am Yisrael bevadai tovim hem. Ribono shel olam, Am Yisrael are for sure good. They're good. Why? Kimata omer shelo kein chas v'sholom. If you're going to say that they're not good, halo you psuin chas v'sholom at-tefillin shelcha. Your tefillin are all based on mi ka'amcha Yisrael gechad baretz, that your people are so special. If you say, oh, that Jew's puzzle, that Jew's puzzle, your tefillin are going to be puzzle. It can't be. That was his defense that was there. Okay, so now let's try to take this a little bit further. The Tiferes Shlomo of Radomsk says that you have to realize that these things actually cause something. Okay, the Sfas says in the Pirkei Avos, where it talks about, al todunes chavercha chetagil imkomo, he has a very basic question that we have these things. Don't judge people favor. Who made you a judge? Who made you a judge? If I walk over to somebody now and say, order in the court, I declare that you have to pay me $100. You're not a judge. You're nothing. So what is that? Going around judging a person. You're not a judge. How does it do? He says, but you are. The Zohar Kodesh says that until a person, in this world, speaks against another Jew, so his sentence isn't finished. And by praising another Jew, so to speak, it can change the sentence that that person has. And here's the fascinating example he brings. Right? It says, "Hevi donis kol adam l'kaf zchus," because our words have power. So the Gemara in Maseches Chagigah says the following: Ashkechei Rabbi Bar Shila Elio. Rabbi Bar Shila met Elio. Amar le, he asked Elio, "My kavi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's HaKadosh Baruch Hu doing right now?" Amar le, "Kama shmaita mipumayo dekulu Rabbanon." He's saying over the teachings of all the Rabbanon. He's saying over Torah from all the Rabbanon. Umipumi de Rabbi Meir lo kamar. But he's not saying over from the mouth of Rabbi Meir, what Rabbi Meir said. Amar le amai, yes, Elio Novi, why not? He says, Mishum de kagama shmaitza mipumi de acher. Because Rabbi Meir was a Talmud of Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, who later on in life, despite all his learning, left that path. And it says that Rabbi Meir, who was his Talmud, kept learning from him. So then Rabbi Barashil said to Yo, I'm really amai, but then why shouldn't Hashem say over Torah from him? Rabbi Meir rimon motza, Rabbi Meir found a pomegranate, tocho ochal, he ate the sweet inside, klipaso zorak, meaning, right, he didn't take any of the bad stuff from Acher, he was able to filter out the good Torah which was there. Amalei, says Eliyahu Hanavi, Hashta Kama, now Kadosh Baruch Hu is saying, Meir b'ni Omer. This is the Torah that my son Meir says. So what happened here? HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows everything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew how Rabbi Meir learned from Acher and how he didn't learn from Acher. He says the inyan is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu interacts with us depending on what we say down here, on how we judge things down here. We see that defense of Rabbi Bar Shila, that changed the entire reaction, the relationship. And until he said that, so then there was a certain limitation to how his Torah was given over in the other worlds. And he says the same thing lehepech. He brings a fascinating halachic example. Until you say something negative, until it's really decided to be negative, the person's status doesn't change. What's the example? He says that the Tumim, Choshen Mishpat brings, that let's say a person knows that he's Pasal Eidus. For whatever reason, this person did one of the things, let's say he's a habitual gambler in secret, okay? A habitual gambler is Pasal Eidus, can't testify. But he's really good at doing it in secret. Nobody else knows. So here he's at something, they come and they ask him at the wedding, come, be an aid at the chuppah, all these kind of things. I got this little dilemma, right? He doesn't want to tell people he's a gambler. He's knowledgeable enough to know that a habitual gambler is puzzle. Guess what? He says, until Beis Din have declared him to be puzzle, he's kosher, even in Shamayim. Meaning, until the sentences actually came out, until people in this world have declared, you are a puzzle-aid, he's kosher, even though he knows that he's done those things that are there. Okay, he says this shows the power of our words in this world, right? It's like a loaded gun. When you put somebody down, when you point out their negative, that has real repercussions. And when you praise them and when you point out their good sides, that also changes things, even in the world above, because that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu set up the world, that it would depend on what we do with our mouths, that we have that power. Now, Reb Asher Weiss recently quoted this. I'd seen it before. I was just mentioning that I'd seen it before, not that I want to say that I knew something, but just to give an advertisement almost. The Talmud Rebbe who I go to, he set up a program that we should learn 10 psukim of Nach a day with a parish. We're in the middle of our third cycle now. And it's very good. I knew a famous teacher of Tanakh. He said, oh, the Rebbe's so smart. He said, by making learning Nach a Hasidic thing, so suddenly all the Hasidim do it. Right? It would be so 10 psukim of Nach. And I remember hitting this in Sefer Shoftim because it's so applicable to now. Am Yisrael were suffering a lot from Midian. Okay? And he has a vision. A malach comes to Gidon and says, Hashem imcha gibor chayil. And then Gidon starts speaking about defending Am Yisrael. He asks Hashem, where the niflos that our forefathers told us that you took us out of Mitzrayim, have you now abandoned us and given us into the hands of Midian? Vayifen elav Hashem. And then Hashem speaks to him and says, Lech b'kolchacha zevo shatos Yisrael mikaf Midian alo shlachticha. Go with the strength of this, with this strength, and go save Am Yisrael from Midian. I have sent you. Rashi says from the Tanchuma, what is this strength? The fact that you defended my children. That is the strength that will enable you to be victorious. So Rav Asher was a chassid of the Kloisenberger Rebbe Zatzal. He said, he noticed that the Kloisenberger Rebbe's hanhaga was at any time of war or danger, he was especially careful not to say anything negative about other Jews. And this thing is a power, right? It's something that we have to see there. That idea of defending and praising, right, and certainly not doing those negative things is something we have to learn to tap into at this time. It's hard, right? On one hand, a person, you have to be real. It doesn't mean that you're blind, because you're supposed to help another person as well, right? If your friend is caught up in a terrible habit and you keep saying, oh, he's wonderful, I refuse to believe that he's doing that, but he needs your help. So you can acknowledge, you can recognize what he's doing without judging him to be bad. By finding all the different ways in which to defend it, the extenuating circumstances, even the very fact that you realize, I don't know. Don't judge your friend until you come to his place, which means really knowing where he comes from. And some of Farshim say, you can never know that. Oh, so the tochacha then is given, but it says, but not lotisol of chet, not hurting him or embarrassing him, right? And in fact, right, I saw the Racham Strifka Rebbe here, he brings down a variety of sources that Chachamim found ways to do the tochacha in ways that it was kind, it was almost through praising the person, meaning, how can you do this? It would be a beautiful example is Rabbi Dr. Chworsky, Avram Chworsky. So he told the story, he wrote his memoirs growing up in Milwaukee with his father, the previous Hornsteipler Rebbe. And he said there was one Rosh Hashanah when they had a guest in the house, and it was Rosh Hashanah afternoon after the meal, still had a break till Mincha. And this guest asked him, right, he says, tell me, you play chess? He says, yeah. So they played chess, right? And somehow this came to his father. So his father called him in after Rosh Hashanah. He says, I heard something. You played chess on Rosh Hashanah. You know better than that. So, yeah. But then he said, his father smiled. He said, but you beat him, didn't you? Checkmate. Right? Then, and he gave him a smile, meaning he knew that tochacha came only from a place of love. Right? That has to be That has to be really where it comes from, and that's the only way it's effective, right? Otherwise, a person feels that so negatively. So there's a story he brings, right? And it's hard, right? We tend to get fired up and judge. One thing that's instructive to look at it in yourself is realize that when someone else is doing something, how you judge them, and when you're doing it, how you judge them, right? It's like they say, huh? How you judge yourself, right? So one example is the 10 items or less aisle in a supermarket, right? Sometimes you're there and you see somebody in front of you and you start counting over his shoulder. 10, 11, 12, 17 items. Russia, stealing people's time. It says 10 items. How dare you? And then one day you're in the supermarket and you're in a real rush. Okay, you're in a real rush. And the other lines have people with these massive carts full of things. And you don't have that much, and you really got to get out of there. So suddenly you do magic. Okay, yogurts, milk, it's all dairy. All came from a cow, that's one. Right? And this, apples, oranges, fruit. Suddenly you've shrank 25 items into 7, and someone says something to you like, sir, this is the 10 items line. You have to be such a rusher? 10 items, mom. There, it's the same person, it's the same you, but looking at it the other way. Okay, so it's very instructive to realize that we do that and how we do that. So he brings a beautiful Maisa here about Rebbe of Strelisk, who was a Talmud of Reb Shlomo Karliner. Shlomo Karliner was the second Rebbe in the Karlin dynasty, and he wasn't the son of the first Rebbe, he was a Talmud. And he had a famous Talmud, Reb Uri Mistrelisk. They used to call him Hasorof Mistrelisk, meaning like the fiery Malach of Strelisk. He was very fiery. So when Reb Shlomo of Karlin was ending his life, Reb Uri tried to get there, but he only got to Karlin after the Rebbe had passed away. And one of the Talmidim who was there said, the Rebbe left a message for you. He said he wants you to go to Rav Mordechai Mineshchiz, another Rebbe who was known at that time. Okay, so he was a fiery chassid. Right away he traveled to Neshchiz. Now he comes into Neshchiz and he sees the Rebbe talking to a Jew, and with his very spiritual, sensitive eyes, he was able to tell that this Jew didn't always do good stuff. This was not, one of the Lamed Vav Tzadikim that the Rebbe was talking to, and the Rebbe was smiling at him and putting his arm around him and doing all these things. And he started thinking to himself, that's what you do with such a person? You show him such love? You show him such kirva, somebody like that? So now the Rebbe of Neshchiz suddenly popped up, and he said, I'll read it in Yiddish, he says, Wer ist the junge Mann, was verdreht mir a Kopf mit seinen Machshavas? He said, who is this young man here that's mixing up my head with his machshavas, meaning these negative thoughts that he's thinking about another Jew? And he said, Mizom firin in kamerol und einsparen. You have to put him in a closet and lock him up. That's what he said. And Hasidim being Hasidim, the Rebbe had Hasidim, they took him and they locked him up in the closet. Okay, so after a while, right, they let him out. The Rebbe said to let him out. And when he came out, he told him like this. He says, why do you think your Rebbe sent you to me? Why do you think that was his last message for you to come to me? So that you'll learn that even if you see a Jew who doesn't behave properly, you have to draw him close and show him love. That's all you needed to learn. Now you can go. Right? And it's an important lesson. Now again, let's pay attention. This doesn't mean that a person gives in to things that want to corrupt Judaism, to corrupt what Torah is, to corrupt these things. A person, and you can even fight very hard against something, still feeling that love, right? And trying to do that, and even seeing the good points that can be there in that person. There's a story about the Alter of Kelm. The Alter of Kelm, they said, he was one of these people. Chazal say, Eino doma mor panav shel adam b'Shabbos mi mor panav b'chol. The light of a person's face on Shabbos is different than that of a weekday. And there were certain tzaddikim that was tangible. The Talmidim of the Alter of Kelm said that he looked very different on Shabbos. One Shabbos they came in, and he looked like his weekday self. And they asked him, what was it? He says, because so-and-so died. who was that so-and-so? He was a big maskil. He was a big anti-religious activist. And they said, because he died, you're not, with your usual level. He says, I feel bad for what his neshama must be going through now. Meaning, even though he had such an opposition to him, he still cared about him. He still felt that empathy for him. Those things always have to be there. And that the bad doesn't always cancel out the good. To realize that there can be, in one thing that the Rebbe always points out, the Gemara says that Yerovam ben Nevat was chosen to be the king of Yisrael. That's a big kibbud. In what schus did he get to do that? It says because he gave tochacha to Shlomo HaMelech. He rebuked Shlomo HaMelech because the day after Shlomo HaMelech married Bas Paro, he was late opening up the Beis HaMikdash. He was the one with the key. And when he came late, Yerovam told him, Your Majesty is not right. He says, why was Yerovam punished? Because he did it publicly and he embarrassed him. So it shows the same action, you can be rewarded for the action and punished for the action. The fact that there's a bad aspect doesn't cancel out the good aspect. But the fact that there's a good aspect doesn't cancel out the bad aspect. We have to learn at least to see both. That enables us to always find that side of good. And the Swarib say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves it when you tell him nice things about his children, and he doesn't like it when you tell bad things. Anyone who's been a parent knows. Somebody comes over and tells you something bad your kid did. Even though you know it's true, you're not happy with that at all. And you're upset with that person. Right? Why'd you have to tell me that? Right? Why'd you have to tell me that? It hurts to get that. Kal v'chomer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Zara Avinu Shebashamayim, he doesn't want to hear that talk either. He wants to hear some nice things. So, if we can do that, hopefully we'll bring a lot of good into the world. Have a wonderful week.